Everyone, and welcome to our webinar this morning, where I'm joined in person, yes, in person, how brilliant, by my special guest, Phil Billingham. Welcome to Cape Town. We'll be exploring today the journey from sales to advice and to planning, and what it takes to have a lean, mean planning machine. I'm Georgina Smith, and it's my privilege to look after the Innate distribution and client service team, and welcome to everyone that's joined us this morning. Now, before we get started, I need to do a little bit of housekeeping. This session will qualify for one CPD point. And a quick note on CPD, for those of you who watch today's webinar in full, you'll receive your CPD point automatically via email. For anyone who didn't join us at the start of today, or who's joining us via the recording or by not your unique registration link, you'll need to fill in a set of questions after the webinar today. And we'll follow up with those with an email after today's session. As always, we're happy to take questions via the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those at the end of today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Phil Billingham, a well-known veteran in our industry. And he's very well known both here and in the UK. Phil joined the industry in 1982. And is a past director of the Institute of Financial Planning and the Society of Financial Advisors, and a past member of the Financial Planning Services Board and Regulatory Advisory Panel. A specialist in helping advisors cope with regulatory change, he has worked with advisors, planners and regulators in the UK, Europe, USA, Canada, South Africa and Australia. That's some list. Phil is an associate of the Chartered Insurance Institute, a fellow of the Personal Finance Society, a certified financial planner, a chartered wealth manager, and a chartered financial planner. Professional Advisor magazine has listed him amongst the top 50 influential advisors. Together with his wife, Shannon, he is an active planner and director of Perceptive Planning. And this firm has been awarded chartered financial planning status, as well as being nominated as a top 100 firm by New Model Advisor magazine 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, and on it goes. International Advisor has also listed him as one of the top 100 global influencers in financial services. And even that biography doesn't really do justice to all the great work that Phil has done, because within the last month, he and Shannon, his wife and fellow financial planner, drove a large van full of emergency supplies, mainly donated by fellow financial planners and your clients, to Poland to help the Ukrainian refugees. And if you're interested in that and seeing corporate and social responsibility in a small firm in action, we can certainly touch on that later. So welcome to the hot seat, Phil. That's some introduction, isn't it?
I think the summary is Phil's old.
Well, perhaps on that note, perhaps you can talk us through your journey in this industry, where you started and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, I guess like most people at the time, 82, I joined by accident. I was 21 years old in Birmingham. I'd managed to be thrown off my degree course. I've gone up in the world. Originally I was thrown out to a polytechnic, and now it's become a university, so I've now been thrown out to a university. So there was nothing there for me. There was a middle of a recession, so it was selling double glazing or selling insurance, and insurance was more honest. So I joined a direct sales commission only outfit. My induction was, here's a rate book, here's Birmingham, come back when you sold something. That's not the summary, that was the induction. And the numbers were horrendous. It was based on very much Project 100, sell to your friends and family. Well, only 6 people in the Midlands, and so that didn't take me very far. And cold calling, and it was hard. The turnover was brutal. I think within 2 weeks, the 9 out of 10 of us that started had gone. I think I was just too stubborn to to leave. So it went from there. So it was the heart of direct sales, if you like, the really red in tooth and claw.
And from there, you moved through various different models, didn't you? I mean, you briefly touched there on the sales model. We'll come back to that in a moment. What happened after that?
I think with hindsight, in the early 80s, 82, 83, companies were still trying to run a 70s direct sales model of cold calling. And it was run by people who'd been successful at cold calling and direct sales. And by the early 80s, it wasn't working. I might say that because I was rubbish at it, but it just wasn't working. And one of the reasons it wasn't working is there was really very little incentive or plan or structure in most firms to look after the orphan clients where somebody'd sold half a dozen policies and then failed and gone off and done something else. But the policies themselves might have been really quite good, quite sound. Life assurance savings, that's good stuff. So I think, like a lot of people at the time, men my age, we survived by reinventing the system in a way, or changing the system. Our specialism was working with orphan clients and people who moved. The firm I happened to join happened to specialize in working with armed forces. And I'm ex-Royal Navy, and that meant that a lot of my clients were SAS or bomb disposal. And there was a lot of people moving to and from Germany and wherever, changing. And we got quite good, my friend and I, working with those clients. And I think then there was a lot of what is now, or what became the independent sector in the UK, came out of that environment where a lot of people who survived and then went, there's got to be another way of doing this. There's a better way of doing this. This is not great. And I think that's where a lot of the independent brokers who became the IFA sector, that's where that came from. It's still sales, still commission, but trying to sell the right products to the right people, have more of a relationship, have a client base. And that's just a happier place to be. It's better for the consumer. It's certainly better for the advisor. Not so good for the companies, and there was a great deal of attrition over that period then with companies who just wanted to sell product. They were just there. One company I was with, the products were called Amethyst and Ruby and all this sort of nonsense, and you just know that's a sales culture. That's nothing to do with the client at all. That's pure sales, and that had to go, and it's gone.
And then how did you then move from advisory into financial planning and where you are now? Yeah,
I'm doing in between, mostly consultancy. But through some of the stuff you talked about, I knew the people involved in the Institute of Financial Planning, and I'd got the other qualifications along the way. And they kept saying, you should do your CFP, you should do your CFP. So eventually in 2006, I did a crash course, 4 days, down in Bristol. And it was transformative. It really was. Halfway through the second day, it really dawned on me that this was just a different world. And I remember saying, and I still believe it, that if everybody did business this way, we'd never get any complaints. It's just the way it should be. And it was a light bulb moment. It literally was a light bulb moment. It was extraordinarily tiring. Shannon took a flat and I couldn't work Excel. So Shannon's trying to teach me how to use Excel and do her own plan. So we're doing a plan for over 4 days. It was a bit of a brutal course. I think the 95% failed the first time. So, of course, Shannon was one amongst the 5% that passed the first time. I wasn't. But boy, I probably learned as much or more in those 4 days than I have in years elsewhere. So it was really, this is the way to do it. At that stage, Shannon and I were in consultancy together. When I first met her, she was head of investment. She investment director at BDO. I used to run about £250 million of other people's money. And in 2009, after working through that, Sharon decided she wanted to go back into financial planning, financial advice to those clients. So we sold the consultancy practice to a larger one. I joined them as head of business consulting, and I took then, my job was to take their clients. They had about 600 IFA firms they looked after. My job was to take those client firms through the RDR, so build a program to take them through RDR. So that's what I did, and then came back and joined the financial planning practice once we got through that process in 2013.
So it's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It's
And I've known you
fun.
for several years now, and know of your profile in the industry. And what you've described there briefly is if you like, three different models really that you've experienced. One being the sales model to start with. Then there's, if you like, the advice model. And then we're talking really about, now we're in the planning model.
Yeah.
I want to take you back to that sales model. I mean, those days in the 80s. How long did you last there? And what did it feel like to be in that world?
How long was I in direct sales? I was in direct sales about 10, 12 years, I think. Something like that, different companies. Never the top performer, but did enough. The odd award, kept me in beer. So I was in that environment for a while. Partially did find training in that period. I was taken on as a trainer on a 6-month contract. Discovered I love training as almost as much as I love selling. I mean, I don't think we always like to admit it, but those always come through there with selling's fun. I always used to say selling is the most fun you can have with your clothes on. It is fun. It's intellectually challenging, but life moves on. And
how many clients were you typically looking after, or even, you might not even call it looking after? But...
and I think that's the heart of it, is that a lot of us did try to, but the number we were looking after compared to the number of sales we made weren't connected. So, and there was no real focus on client retention within the companies. And in fact, the bancassurance model in the UK that everybody was very frightened about. I remember the first time I went to the States and talked to people there in 1985. They were quite frightened of the bancassurance model. And it completely failed in the UK. And one of the reasons it failed, one reason was they had a deliberate policy of moving the advisor between branches to break up that relationship, because they viewed the advice process or the sales process as obtaining clients for the bank, and it was nothing to do with the salesman. And I know personally some very good financial planners in the UK. Hi, Darren. Who came out to that model and just couldn't cope with that, and went and set up on their own. And guess what? Their clients found them. Or the better clients find them, because it is about relationship. It is about the person. And I think a fundamental misunderstanding of the banks and the big companies is they believe that the money is the client. They absolutely get that, and they don't really get that the person is the client. And if the money could come in and be reviewed on its own without bringing these people in with them that have emotions and are complicated, that would suit them down to the ground.
I think it was you that said to me, I think you were the first person that said to me, we're in the business of people, not the business of money. And that's really stuck with me, because I think you're absolutely spot on there. So the idea of obviously in the UK of banks kind of making the most of this model, is that still happening? And is this direct sales model still in existence very much in the UK?
Insurance companies keep wanting their direct sales back. They're reading ABI responses to consultation papers is always an exercise in amusement. I think they want to go back to brown suits and kipper ties and kajagoogoo as well. I'm sorry, the 80s is not coming back, and neither should it. I think in financial services, direct sales is is a broken model, and it's unprofitable in the longer term. The best thing that happened with that model is when they stopped paying senior people on the number of products sold, because people will always find a way of doing what they're paid to do. Breaking that relationship was really quite important. The mindset is still there with some companies. I've been told by big firms that the role of the advisor is to bring them clients, which is both arrogant and stupid, but that's big companies for you. So it just doesn't work. I mean, it's not that it's against somebody's religion. It just physically doesn't work. And the truth is, I think if anybody thinks it is going to work for them, then they're going to be competing with Pick and Pay and Tesco's and Amazon and Takealot, because that's how people buy commodities now, and deal with simplicity. And frankly, I'd love that. I would love that if people could go to the checkout at Tesco's and swipe a card and I want to say, oh yeah, you haven't topped up your ISA this month. Would you like to do so? I think, I'm feeling a bit flush. Yeah, I'll put a couple £100 in. I think that would be fabulous. A friend of mine once said that Tesco's knew his wife was pregnant before he did, and what she was buying. And then on the reward card, and 9 months later, they were sending offers for baby stuff. That's the algorithms there of capturing the data. For some reason, Tesco send me stuff about cheese and wine, so they've got me wrong.
I don't think they have.
Obviously. But you can't compete with that. You just can't compete with that. And I think you can end up distributing products for 2 basis points, not 100 or 1,000. It's a different world. So if people want to go direct sales, that's your competition. Good luck with that. It's not going to happen. Especially
when you think of the ecosystem that supports those kind of businesses, the loyalty cards, the benefits, the insights and all of that. I tend to agree with you.
And the economics of it, those jobs don't have to be done in the City of London at £100 an hour. They can be done in Bangalore a lot less than that.
So you touched on it earlier about moving into more of an independent space, and you talked very much about I want to be able to form a relationship with the clients and give ongoing advice. How did that play out in your day-to-day life?
My main involvement in that space was as a consultant support to them rather than doing it myself. If I'm completely truthful, I set up a compliance consultancy that became other things. So we ended up specializing in looking after the financial advice arm of accountancy practices. So I saw a lot of that higher end stuff, certainly around the tax place. Particularly, I was involved in then UK regulation in one way or another from A Day, 29th of April 1988, and it's really sad that I know that. Now I'm about my 11th or 12th UK regulator. I've taken to writing them in pencil on things. So they move on, but it was how to make the regulation work was really what became my specialism. That's partly driven by how your regulation evolved. Your regulation evolved from very much a buyer beware environment.
Which I guess you're talking about the sales environment.
Sales environment,
kind of buyer beware.
Yeah, and if you're going to spend money on it, then that's your choice. And you've got to learn, trust the brand and whatever. And in the States, you can sue people. The regulators saw the flaws in that, and I accept the flaws and agree with them. But the way they chose to deal with it was through disclosure. I guess they call it education, and that's grown. And I remember the first buyer's guide in the UK. It was 2 pages, and there was a half a chance that clients might read that. They didn't read the 2 pages. And I think we've got to remind ourselves that we all lie 4 or 5 times a day. And for most of us, those 4 or 5 times was when we ticked the box to say that we've read and understood the terms and conditions. Has anybody ever read and understood Apple's terms and conditions?
I certainly haven't.
It's ridiculous. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, life's too short. 2, it's in very small font, and I'm getting very old. But 3, we know we can't change it. We can't go to Apple and say, oh, could you change subparagraph 4? That's not going to happen. So we're powerless. So disclosure doesn't empower anybody. It's just a cop-out. I think when I was doing a lot of compliance work and file checking work, I read thousands upon thousands of files. It was quite clear that there's a category of work done by some advisors that I would, amongst compliance people, is called compliant but crap.
So I'll just stop you there, because we use crap all the time in the UK. I think we can call it cuck here, just in case.
It's still sticky, horrible brown stuff. And it's compliant. So you have to tick a box to say the file was compliant. But if somebody had given that advice to your brother or your sister, you go around and kneecap them. It just became an excuse. And I always winced when an advisor would ask me, am I allowed to do that? Because I always felt if you're asking that question, the line is now behind you. So disclosure and advisors ended up working, in many ways, working to the compliance practice. It's like playing the ref in rugby.
Yeah.
Well, once you do the first crooked put in and the ref doesn't call it, every put in after that is crooked.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's the direct equivalent to that. And I'm not saying that's all about advice. The IFA sector in the UK, mainly small practices, without question, on every metric ever measured, was producing better advice than any of the other models. And flaws, it's like saying, Winston Churchill, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. So it's very easy to focus on those flaws, but the advice coming out of that on the main was far ahead of anything else that was around.
And how does the advisor get paid in that model? What are the typical payment structures? And then, compared with the sales model as well that we just spoke about.
Yeah. Up until 2012, RDR, excuse me, that was still a commission model. Post January 2013, it's been a fee model. It is quite interesting how much some of the fee models look like commissions in terms of percentages. So that's still a work in progress, I think. But the most important thing about it is it's much more clearly the client's money. It's much more of a bottom-up model rather than a top-down. You get paid what you agree with the client from the bottom up, rather than what commission a provider chooses to pay. So even if the two amounts are the same, it's still fundamentally different. And most of those advisors have now pretty much 90% client retention models, not new business models. And I think that's been in some ways been a massive improvement for the consumer. The big problem in the UK it's caused is there is a huge shortage of advisors, and it's very difficult for middle affluent consumers to get good advice. They're almost driven to the banks, and they're never going to get good advice there.
And just thinking about that sort of, getting paid for retention, and you see a BIP rate, if you like, over the AUM of a client. I mean, a lot of that also is driving the asset of the advisor, their own personal asset that they can hopefully sell in succession planning. Would you agree with that?
That's the way the numbers are. It's caused some concerns, and the more, and I guess I'm speaking for personally here, the more focused you are on planning, the more focused a firm is on not using products and active funds, using evidence-based, and the more comfortable they get clients with that model, that is cutting down the universe of people who can buy you. So that's quite an interesting dynamic as a business person.
Why do you say that?
Because if you take up, people with the money to spend, come through venture capital or fund managers or product providers, and the economic rationale for the sale is to, let's not call it churn, but it only makes sense if somebody is then moved from having, take our little practice, taking £10 million out of Vanguard and putting it into ABC active fund and it could be twice the price. And consumers may accept that. It's a brand and people buy brands, but I'm not convinced that's the best outcome. So you're looking, as a business person, you would be looking to be bought by somebody who has the same ethos and the same values and the same beliefs, because you want your clients to be looked after in that. And I'm already having conversations with clients when I'm talking about their next 10 or 15 years, knowing I'm not going on that journey with them, that within the practice, there are people who can do that, but it won't be me. So that's quite challenging.
Yeah, and succession planning, I think, is such a hot topic, and it doesn't matter. It certainly is here. I've seen lots of chat in the UK as well about it. And I think you're quite right. What you're alluding to there is, a venture capitalist or a bigger company comes into wanting to put you in their solutions, because of course it increases the PE rather for when they eventually move you on, perhaps. And then what's the alternative to that though, Phil?
I think there are a few out there. My friend Chris Budd is very involved in the eternal company stuff, where basically it's an employee trust buyout, and that's a number of big, very good firms. Paradigm Norton, I guess, are the biggest in the UK, going down that route. Internal succession. I mean, Shannon and Alan are both 10, 11, 12 years younger than me. So that makes a difference, and we need to look at that, bringing people through. We do need to be bringing people through. It would be great to have a chartered financial planner in their 40s in our business. That would be fun, because that gives us another 15 or 20 years. So that's important. I think mergers can happen, and it doesn't have to dilute the quality. We've seen that in vets and dentists. I moved to a small village in Pewsey, and there were 5 vets, and I moved to the village, all independent. When I left the village 7 years later, there were still 5 vets, but under 2 brands. But the quality coming out of there was still brilliant quality. It was just a different world. So I think we can do that, but we have to be careful who we partner with. And there is a synergy there. I think the challenge is an ego one. A lot of the people there look a bit like me and my sort of age, and it's been a journey to get there. And the only way to get to doing what they want to do and to be able to deliver their beliefs and their values is to do it yourself. There's been a rejection of the corporate environment. And running a financial planning business can be hard, but can be a big warm bath, because everybody loves you. Your staff love you, your clients love you, providers want to spend money. You get a lot of affirmation in that respect. So I think when you're trying to merge those businesses, everybody has to give up a bit of sovereignty, and that can be a bit tough. But it's important that happens. That transition has to happen. We're in the middle of a process, or start of a process. We're not at the end of a process.
And I think it's so interesting what you say, because what tends to happen is the financial advisor, financial planner is the brand themselves. And you said earlier, you hold the relationships. It's not the bank or whoever. It's you guys that hold the relationships. And when you're the brand, it becomes actually detrimental to any kind of succession plan, because it becomes quite difficult. I want to explore this advice model, a little bit more, if I may. And really sort of think about, we talked about how an advisor gets paid. What are the normal profit margins you'd see in this kind of model? And let's just define what it is, because we're going to talk about a third model, which is a financial planning model. So we talked about the sales model. We want to talk about this advice model, and we've mentioned it's doing as much as you need to get through the compliance, if you like, and that might be unfair
for some.
Yeah.
For some. So yeah, I think for some that's not fair. IFA businesses were reasonably profitable, and then RDR made them very profitable. One thing, and an unintended consequence, I'm sure, of RDR is it forced firms to look very hard at where their income was coming from, and challenged a lot of advisors who've never had to go to clients and say, it's because I'm worth it. You need to pay me. And an awful lot of advisors, and I've been there in those conversations, found that their valid relationships, clients they loved to bits, were unprofitable relationships, and that was very challenging for them. And that led to an increase in fees and simplification processes and whatever. And the shorthand is that those clients became, those firms became more profitable. And we saw that with, in 2014-15, I did work with the Institute of Financial Planning in the UK, doing an analysis of accredited firms, looking at their numbers and metrics and who they were using, and productivity and profitability. And you're looking at individual advisors very roughly making, looking at turning over about £180,000 per annum per advisor, and probably keeping about 40% of that to themselves. And that's, with other stuff on top, that's a reasonably well-paid job for a lot of people.
And what would be the total client assets there?
Total client assets would be something like 12 to 15 million, because a lot of that model is about the charging 3% for each bit on top and whatever. So probably about 60-70% of that model would be underlying income, which was a big jump up, and that was already happening pre-RDR, but RDR just pushed that. It's all about client retention. So quite profitable. I think in lots of those businesses, 80% of the profit probably came from 20 clients, not 20%.
That's always the case.
And that sort of analysis. But RDR forced firms to, for the first time, to take a consultancy look at themselves and a business look at themselves, because most IFAs are in business by accident. You know, they got good at getting clients, they couldn't do it themselves, so they had to recruit staff, and suddenly there's offices, and suddenly they're running a business with 15, 20 people in it, turning over £1 million, and they go, how did this happen?
How did I get here? How did I get here? I know, yeah, I do see that quite a lot. What would the typical client journey be like in this sort of model? What does that look and feel like?
I think the front part of that is pretty good for clients, because clients people become clients at a point of stress in their lives. And the initial client process deals with that stress, I think, reasonably well. Where the money is part of the stress, they've inherited money, they're divorced, they're retiring, they've sold a business, those sort of trigger points. And I think the advice model, the IFA model in particular, deals with that pretty well. Lots of paperwork, but pretty well. The model used to be less good at looking after those people, and allocating people to do that. It's got better. So I think with some firms, clients could feel that they only want to talk to me when I think I've got money. And I've seen quite a few ongoing processes that are about reviewing the performance of the portfolio rather than who the client is. And you can see that on websites very often. You go on a website, what do we do? Pensions, mortgages, ISAs. It's technical. It's about that. In fact, there was an exercise done a number of years ago, and it measured, and it was with bancassurance staff, but they measured how long it took from the beginning of a conversation to the first time the advisor used any technical language or to discuss the product or tax in any way. Any guesses?
Oh, I don't know. Within the first 10 minutes, I would have thought.
I wish it was that long.
Oh,
82 seconds.
you're kidding.
I'm not kidding. I'm
Okay.
seriously not kidding. And what's scary is I've gone into the larger sales organizations, given that number, and then done some training, and we struggle to get some of them over 2 minutes.
Really?
Really struggle, because that's what they're trained to do. That's what they know. That's where they think they're adding the value. You've come to see me about the money.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not that they're stupid or lazy. It's that that's what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
That's what they're good at. And it's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the business of money, not the business of people.
Exactly.
It is what it can feel like. And I've been a client in that model. And yes, I did end up talking about portfolios, fund picking, tax efficiency, all of those sort of technical subjects, which at the time felt okay, actually.
Yeah.
Because I guess I didn't know any better.
It's a professional environment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And it fulfilled a need that I had. But I think your philosophy very much is that it can be better than that. And so perhaps that's a nice segue into planning.
Yes.
What does that look like?
The buzzword is holistic. So let's put that buzzword to one side, because I don't think that helps us. But it is looking at the person. And it's not an accident that some planners, and I'm not one of them, but some planners have moved and gone into more life coaching and life planning. And there's a lot of disparaging comments about that, but I don't think it is disparaging. I think people are attracted to that area, and the money. I think people are interested in money is boring inherently. And I think an awful lot of what is done now quite well in the advice model can be done by people elsewhere, can be done remotely. And I think we've all learned what can be done remotely over the last 2 years. It can be done by algorithm to a very large degree. So I think there is an inherent built-in redundancy to a lot of the value of the advice model if they're not careful. Financial planning, people are always going to do weird and interesting things. It's great. I think talking to some of my clients, in 6 or 12 months time, all I can guarantee will be the same as the date of birth. Everything else could have changed. I get to work with people who are not dumb, not stupid, done interesting things, have Wikipedia pages, who write books, who, as a financial planner, I've got clients who are authorized to give advice and work in the city and manage, know much more about money than me, much more about money than I do. Compete with that space. They turn up with portfolios and spreadsheets and Sharpe's ratios and yields. And I go, okay, I'm not going to do that. We're going to do this other stuff. Yeah. What if I kill you off? Can Mrs. look after this? No. Right. Well, let's start with that as a process. Yeah. Let's do that stuff. This stuff doesn't matter. It really doesn't. An extra 1% performance is irrelevant. You might think it's important, but it's really not. It's the other stuff that really, really, really matters.
And what is that other stuff?
It's the phone call on a Monday morning. My mate down the golf club's got this clever idea. No, but it's only 50,000. No, but no. It's wealthy. All the wealth happens to be in the husband's name, but it really is family wealth, and the wife has no idea where the stuff is. And we have it the other way as well. I'm a client, and they thought they were worth about 1.5 million when we met them. They can be great surprise when we found out they were worth 3.4, and we got both of them to retire within a year, 18 months. Took a little while, but we've had to simplify, because if anything had happened to her, he didn't even know his passwords. Not the first clue. Not the first clue.
I think that might be my husband, actually.
It's looking at that stuff. It's a bit, it's the other stuff. A lot of people learned that, you know what, you could die tomorrow. We all lost people during the pandemic. I managed to do my time in ICU and all the rest of it myself. I've got Scott to prove it. this stuff can happen. Nobody's going to remember in the mess that left behind there was an extra 1% performance. But the fact is that paperwork fire drill, that the powers of attorney are in place, the wills are in place, they're up to date. We know where all the bank, that stuff is much more important under those points of stress. It's, I always say I can do financial planning for most people for the price of a beer. It's on the back of a beer mat. It's spend less, save more, insure the breadwinner, and make a will. Well, if you do that stuff, you'll never be poor. Then when it comes in, you suddenly got 3 jobs on 2 continents, and you're on your second family, and you've got a business, and life's a bit complicated. Right, now let's talk, because there's stuff there I can help you with.
And I think when I listen to you, and perhaps if I was to put a client hat on, it's the difference between knowing how much money I've got and knowing what my portfolio is invested in and things like that, between actually wanting to go and be able to sleep at night. You know, have I got enough? You know, am I going to be okay?
Yeah.
Would that be a fair assumption?
That's fair for a lot of people. And I think there are 3 categories. There's people who haven't got enough but need to get more secure, more resilient, and we work with people with that. There's people who've got enough if they do things carefully, if they think it through, if they carry on what they're doing, if they don't make mistakes. And then there's a category of people who've got more than enough, but how now do we work with that? And Shannon in particular, as a specialist of working with intergenerational, and we've got more than a few clients now where Shannon is working on with the 3rd generation of the same family. And there's a little saying in the office that, you know, with every gift comes a planner. So money's given, and given with a warm hand, not a cold hand, given during life when you can see the benefit. But it's balancing that. Have I got enough to give? Yes, you have, and we can work it out. And we can put contingencies, and we build. With some clients, we build what we call engines. And we put it over here, and that's on one platform, and that's like a diesel engine. It's just going to tick away, and that's going to make sure you never run out of money. But there's this money left over, and we often put it on a different platform, and we treat it as a different client, and then that's to do stuff with, and that can be quite interesting for people. So yeah, sleeping at night, but sleeping at night, is it enough money? Am I going to leave my family okay? If anything happens to me, can they cope with all of this? Those are the worries. So where money is part of the problem, not necessarily part of the solution. But at that understanding of financial resilience, and then understanding moving on to financial independence, I think those are 2 important things, and we need to make sure that people are getting to those things. Resilience, first of all. Yeah. If you're not financially resilient, you'll never be financially independent. And then moving on beyond that, people like financial planning. Clients, it's odd sometimes to talk about it in commercial terms, because financial planners are not, Barry Horn, I would say, if you meet a poor financial planner, it means they're a poor financial planner. and I sort of get that. But financial planners find people come to us with X amount, and it's extremely common. In fact, the majority of people, once they've experienced that process, say, well, I've got this other amount, I've got this, or there's somebody else in the family. So what we learned going to RDR when we did the number crunching, going back to some of your metrics, is that on average at that time, financial advisors got paid 30 odd basis points on about 40% of the client's disposable or investable wealth. On average, financial planners get paid about 85 basis points on about 95% of the client's investable wealth. And that's the big game changer. Yeah. So we're going from 150, 180,000 turnover financial advisor, and that's still pretty good. Financial planning firms, it's not uncommon to see that number as 300, 400,000. Yeah. And people say, oh, that's because you've got wealthier clients. Sort of, but actually those clients are wealthy as well. You just don't look after it. These clients are wealthy, and then you're dealing with the next generation. We put a lot of effort into that. In the States, the studies are that 85–90% of plan advisors, when their client dies, the assets move for lots of reasons. For a lot of reasons, we put a lot of work into the next generation. We take Paul Etheridge's rules about we provide financial planning for free to our clients, our children. And we got to the point where 85% of clients' children who could be clients are clients.
That's a very good retention rate.
In their own right. Now that creates some conflicts because parents give them money and say, well, I want my daughter to do this with it. So they're not talking to you. It's not your money. No, I gave it to you. It's my money. No, not your money. And we'll then do things within the office. We have shadows, and we'll separate them out, the shadows. So the shadows, so there's a degree. I mean, everybody can see all the clients and all the rest of it, but we just try to psychologically say, this is yours. You've given your money over here. That's now theirs.
Yeah.
And then we look after that. And then they learn, the children learn to trust us. They come to us with stuff that they wouldn't go to their parents. So it takes a while. Shannon's great at it. Shannon's really good at it. It takes a while.
And it sounds like when I listen to you, it's a very different client journey, a very different client conversation. I mean, for example, we spoke about tax efficiency conversations, portfolio, fund picking conversations. How much, if any, of your conversations with your clients revolves around product and investment choices versus, lifestyle, if you like?
It does depend on the client a little bit. We have got some people who are a bit geeky and like that. We find if they're taking too much interest in picking the funds and whatever, then it's usually easier just to carve out a bit of portfolio for them, and they run it, and we don't charge them for it, but we'll host it and be the advisor. And they just need to report capital gains and losses to us, so we can do the rest of the stuff. We do that work. It's their entry stakes, their hygiene factors. We do the work. We do the fund picking. We do the fund analysis. We have the spreadsheets. We work on tax efficiency. We're obsessive about capital gains tax. We have the right fund and the right wrapper. That's an income generating fund. It should be in the ISA, because over there we can do CGT. We do that stuff because we're geeks. We've got. We're a small practice. I've got 2 chartered titles. Shannon will have 2 chartered titles very shortly. She's IMC. We've got another IMC as a shadow. And everyone bar one of the team is doing qualifications, even though they can advise. That's stuff we do, but we don't have to show our working all the time. But we behind the scenes. Some clients love it. I tend to have that conversation with Shannon because she's much better at it. I'm not the investment person. Our clients learn very quickly, but I'll do all this stuff, and then is Shannon around because I want to talk about investments. Okay.
But again, you see, then it's not all hinging on you. We talked earlier about a succession plan, and the succession plan is in my experience works best when the brand isn't all hinged on one person. And
I think there's a misapprehension there sometimes, and I agree with you. The firm is Shannon's. Shannon's the majority shareholder. There's three directors, 2 which are women in there, and there's not yet in her 50s. I know she's watching, but it will be, 2 women in their 50s who own the majority of the shares of the company. So whilst people sort of know who I am for other things, I think the succession is from them. They're not part of my succession planning in any way. I think it's much more about playing to strengths, and you haven't got to be everything. And I think within a practice where we're all about client retention, if we go a month or 2 without taking on a client, nobody notices really. If we lose a client, we lose very, 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 very few clients. Losing a client is endless angst. And most of the clients have left us because we've explained to them they have to go. But we reject is the wrong word. There used to be an ad in the UK, John West. It's the Fish John West reject that make John West the best.
Yeah.
That's the strap line.
Yeah.
And I think not taking on clients just because you can. It's taking on clients who there's an added value and a meeting of minds is why clients then stay. For a time I ran some workshops, and I had one guy who ran an old-fashioned advisory practice in Glasgow, and the first part of this workshop was on transition, and he was like a rabbit in the headlights. He was the stuff I was throwing in the first day. I thought he's not coming back. So it was a 3-month program, but he came back, and he got involved in all the the dodgy schemes, all the clever stuff. It was and he was undercharging ongoing, so he had to go out and find new clients, and it just wasn't right. And I remember getting a phone call from him because I'd explained to him, if you've never turned away a client, a potential client, you don't have a client proposition.
Yeah.
And I remember, and he's sort of trying to get his head around that. So I had a phone call about 7 o'clock one Friday night, because everybody's got my mobile. I've had the same number for 30 years. And it was, on the phone, Phil, I've just turned away a client who was going to pay me £2,000 in a Glaswegian accent. I'm like, okay, so how do you feel about that? It's great. It's the best thing I've done. Thank you for that. That's the best. I just feel fat. And it's 7 o'clock, and I just have to tell you.
Oh, isn't that great?
And they tripled their profits in 18 months after that. His partner, so I was at a conference with his partner a few months later. I didn't have to buy many beers that night. But it's hard. Change is hard.
Yeah,
change stuff is hard.
And when I think about, a lot of you talked about sort of some of the, some of the practices out there where you've got an advisor and you've got an advisor assistant to deliver the sort of experience you're talking about, the planning experience. What is the support network that's needed? What do you need in place? Is it enough to have an assistant just working alongside you?
I think the support structure originally grew as support for advisors. So the contact with the client was through the advisor, and the advisor would then contact the office and deal with stuff. So the client was outside of that structure. And I think what we've all discovered is, so that structure was almost an advisor support mechanism rather than a client support. So you're talking about almost an advisor-centric firm rather than a client-centric firm in operation, in structure.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, I agree with you.
But delivering great advice and great service. But with planning, it's too hard to do it that way. It actually getting the client that sits in the middle, and there's almost a triangle around them of a planner, power planner stroke shadow stroke client support, whatever the title is, and then the administration function, where the client knows that they're going to get contacted by different people and should contact different people about different things. And clients will do that. And we have an email directly to Kelly asking about stuff because they know that Kelly's dealing with that. I'm not. And it's a client at the moment who's transferring a lot of money. So they're going to be at seven figures offshore and dealing with stuff. But the emails go to Kelly because absolutely know that Kelly's on top of that dealing with it. I'm not. It's not a technical issue. It's not a planning issue. We've dealt with that bit. There's other stuff to come, but this process is being dealt with by Kelly, and therefore Kelly gets the emails.
And again, this speaks again to increasing your value of your practice, because it's not all about you. It's not all hanging on you.
Can't all be about me.
No, absolutely. So we've got a little bit of time, 4 minutes, in fact, to go to some questions. Sorry about that. We've been having such a great chat. So there's a few comments that have come through, and I just want to touch on some of them. So hello, Andrew. Thanks so much for this one, Andrew. You're a regular on our webinar, so thank you for joining us again. And he totally agrees about compliance being a bit of a cop out, and the fact that people don't read T's and C's, and it really is just a tick box in some places. And then Kurbus, I know you know Kurbus well. Always a pleasure, Phil. Knowledge cannot be brought off the shelf, and I think that's very much what you advocate as well. Question I've got here from Peter: in the South African market, there's a lot of talk about intergenerational wealth transfer. Has there been similar talks in the UK, and how have advisors advised clients to transfer wealth from generation to generation.
There is, absolutely right. It's a function around the world, and particularly most of our clients originally first generational wealth, but then it's dealing with the next bit. A couple of things. One, people have to feel safe to give. It's much better to give during somebody's life. I think the Glaswegian expression is to give with a warm hand rather than a cold hand. Give during your life, not in your will. And where you can influence that, there is the old model of the first generation makes it and second and third generation will spend it. That's because they're not educated. They get it at death.
Yeah,
it's the wrong time. So learning to manage money and learn to deal with it. It means advisors and planners have to start working with people who don't qualify in their own right to be clients yet. We have to take 5, 10, 15, 20-year viewpoints here. One advisor practice thought that they were going to get the next generation because they'd be the one delivering the check on death. It doesn't work like that. You've got to have a relationship. They've got to learn to trust you, not as daddy's advisor, but as somebody they can trust in their own right. So guess what? Our client service model, they get exactly the same service. It takes time, it takes money, it takes focus, but it works.
Yeah. It reminds me, my granny always used to say clogs to clogs in 3 generations.
Yeah.
That's that, the first one earns it and the next 2 generations spend it. And if you can actually educate them, as you quite rightly say, educate the whole family that, this can be built up and the education around financial spending, financial wealth, financial well-being, then that's a real value add, I think, for any wealthy high net worth client. Would you agree?
It is, and I think we're back to the emotions. And I've known people inherit money and then not want to do anything with it because it's guilt.
Yes.
It's granny's money. I shouldn't have it. I'd rather granny was here with me.
Yeah.
And that's hard to deal with that. And we have to, but it isn't easier if they're part of that process. We've already got clients who are very wealthy, children coming up to 18, and we're already planning for the children to be involved in some of the conversations, some of the meetings, not all of them, but some of them.
Phil, that brings us to the end. What an interesting hour. I hope that you guys have got as much out of this hour as I have, speaking to, I know he doesn't like me saying it, but he really is a legend in our industry, both here and in the UK. Thank you very much, Phil. I think it's been insightful and very educational. And please do follow up with any questions. We can certainly help out going forward if you'd like us to. Do tune in again in May. There's a couple of webinars lined up in May. There's In the Room with Steve Backhouse, and then I'll be talking to David Pullen as well, who's a storytelling expert helping financial advisors build their storytelling brand. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for your insights.
Innate is a registered trademark of Stanlib Wealth Management Pty Limited, an authorized financial services provider.